They mocked the single dad mechanic until his kindness changed a billionaire's daughter's life. The car died on the worst possible road. Not a highway, not somewhere with a shoulder wide enough to breathe. It died on a narrow two-lane stretch of Old Tulsa, right in front of a garage with a hand-painted sign that read Delacroix Auto S 2011. The engine gave one long, ugly shudder and then nothing. Just silence, the smell of something burning, and the particular helplessness that comes when a machine that was supposed to carry you somewhere decides it is done. Lena Hargrove sat behind the wheel for exactly 4 seconds. Then she got out. She was wearing a blazer the color of charcoal, pressed slacks, and shoes that cost more than most people's monthly grocery bills. Her hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless but was not. She stood on the cracked asphalt and looked at the garage the way a person looks at a place they would never have chosen, and then she walked toward it anyway. Inside, there was the sound of a wrench turning, a radio playing something old and gospel-adjacent, the smell of oil and rubber and coffee that had been sitting on a burner for too long. Marcus Delacroix was underneath a pickup truck. He was not a large man, but he had the kind of presence that made a room feel accounted for. 41 years old, with hands that had been doing this work since he was 17, learning beside his father in a garage 2 towns over. He wore a gray uniform shirt with his name stitched over the chest pocket in blue thread. The stitching was slightly uneven because his daughter Nia had redone it herself after the original came loose, at age 9, with a determination that allowed for no argument. He did not hear Lena come in. She cleared her throat. He rolled out from under the truck on a low board with wheels, looked up at her, and said nothing for a moment, not rudely, just the way a man looks when he is reading a situation before he responds to it. "My car stopped," she said, "right outside." "I heard it," he said. He stood, wiped his hands on a cloth that was already well past its useful life. Then he walked past her toward the door, and she followed him out to where her SUV sat at an angle on the side of the road. He crouched beside it. He did not pop the hood immediately. He looked at the car first the way a doctor looks at a patient before touching them. "How long has it been running rough?" he asked. She paused. "About 3 weeks. Idle stutter like a hiccup." She looked at him. "Yes, exactly like that." He nodded once, then he opened the hood. Behind them from inside the garage came the sound of chairs scraping. 3 men who had been sitting against the far wall, retired, regular, loud in the comfortable way of men with nowhere urgent to be, had come to the doorway to watch. They did this for most things. It passed the time. The one named Gary, who had a white mustache and a laugh that arrived before his jokes did, looked at Lena's car, then at Lena, then at Marcus. "What'd she do, drive it off a showroom floor and forget to put gas in it?" he said. The other 2 laughed, not mean, exactly, just the easy laughter of men who did not think much about who might be listening. Marcus did not turn around. Lena did not flinch. She had been in boardrooms with men far more calculated than Gary. She knew the difference between a knife and a butter spreader. This was a butter spreader. Marcus leaned over the engine. He asked her one more question. The right one, the one the dealership had apparently not thought to ask in the 3 weeks she had been driving a car with a hiccup. "Has the check engine light been doing anything unusual, blinking rather than staying solid?" "Yes," she said. "It blinks about 30 seconds after I start it and then goes solid." What? He straightened up. "Camshaft position sensor, possibly the timing chain tensioner. I'll need to run a diagnostic to know which one's the actual problem." "How long?" "Diagnostic takes about 40 minutes, then I can tell you." She nodded. "Fine." He looked at the car one more moment. "I'll get it inside." Gary called from the doorway. "Marcus, make sure you charge her the special rate." Another laugh, the kind that was supposed to be a joke but carried a small, mean freight that everyone could feel even if they didn't name it. Marcus turned around then. He looked at Gary with an expression that was not anger. It was something quieter and more final than anger. Gary stopped laughing and found something else to look at. Lena noticed that. She noticed it the way you notice something without meaning to, the way a detail lodges before your brain decides whether it is important. She sat in the small waiting area, 2 plastic chairs, a folding table with a coffee maker, a child's drawing taped to the wall, while Marcus moved her car inside. The drawing was of a house with a tall figure and a smaller one in front of it, written underneath in the uneven capital letters of a young child, "Me and Daddy." She looked at it for a long time. 40 minutes passed. The diagnostic machine beeped and printed. Marcus studied the readout and came to the waiting area doorway. Camshaft sensor, he said. The timing chain tensioner is fine. You got lucky there. The sensor's the fix. How much? He told her. She waited for the number to be a trap. It was not. It was an honest number, so honest it almost had the quality of an insult to her assumption that everything in this world was designed to take something from her. The part has to come in, he said. I can have it here in 2, maybe 3 days. I'll need a loaner. He was quiet for a second. I have one car. It's a 2009 Civic with a passenger window that only goes halfway down. You're welcome to it. She looked at him. He was not apologizing for the Civic. He was not overpromising. He was just telling her what existed and offering what he had. That's fine, she said. And then from the back of the garage, from behind a door that opened into a small room that served as an office and apparently also as an after-school situation, a child appeared. Pigtails, 9 years old, one sock pulled up higher than the other, a notebook tucked under one arm and a pencil behind her ear in the manner of a much older person who had watched someone do that and decided it was an efficient system. She stopped when she saw Lena, not shy, just assessing. Is that your car? She asked. She was looking at the SUV on the lift. It was, Lena said, until about an hour ago. It's a hybrid, the girl said. It was not a question. It is. The girl nodded with the gravity of someone confirming a suspicion. Dad says hybrids are smart but complicated. Like people. Lena looked at Marcus. He had his eyes on a clipboard, but the corner of his mouth had moved. I'm Nia, the girl said. Lena. Nia wrote something in her notebook. What she wrote, Lena could not see. She did not ask, but something crossed her face as she watched this child, this small, serious person in a garage in Tulsa with uneven pigtails and a pencil behind her ear, standing in the ordinary afternoon light as though it belonged to her completely. It was not a feeling Lena had a name for at that moment. She took the keys to the 2009 Civic. The passenger window rolled down 4 inches and stayed there. She drove out of the garage parking lot onto the street, into traffic, into the rest of her afternoon. She had 3 meetings to get back to. A call with the London office, a dinner with her father's associates at 7. She made it to one of the 3 meetings. The other 2 she sat through without being entirely present, in the particular way a person is absent when something small has reached into them and rearranged something they didn't know could be moved. 3 days later, the part had not arrived. The supplier was behind. Marcus called Lena to tell her himself, not a text, a phone call, and explained the delay in plain language without inventing a better reason than the true one, which was simply that these things sometimes took longer than expected. The part will be here Thursday, he said. I'll have the car done by end of day. All right, she said. There was a pause on the line, not uncomfortable. Something else. Is the Civic managing all right? He asked. The window's still stuck at 4 inches. I know, I keep meaning to get to that. She said it was fine. She ended the call. On Tuesday, she went back to the garage. She told herself it was to sign some paperwork he had mentioned. There was no paperwork he had mentioned. She stood at the front of the garage and watched Marcus work for a moment before he noticed her. He was replacing the brake pads on an old sedan, not her car, someone else's, moving with the economy of a man who had done this so many times that his hands knew the job before his mind formed the instruction. Outside the open garage door, an elderly woman in a small brown car was parked at an angle, both hands on the steering wheel, looking at the dashboard with the expression of someone who has asked a machine to cooperate and been refused. Marcus saw her before Lena said anything. He wiped his hands, walked out to the woman's window and bent down to talk to her. Then he went to his own truck, got the jumper cables, and spent the next several minutes jumping her car back to life. When he came back inside, he went straight to the sedan brake job. He did not announce what he had done. He did not look toward the garage door to see if anyone had noticed. Gary and his 2 companions were in their usual chairs. Gary said something to the man next to him that Lena didn't catch. They laughed softly. Marcus said without looking up from the brake rotor, "You 3 want coffee, there's a fresh pot." It was a redirection, not a response. It worked the way his silences worked, not cold but definitive. The conversation in the chairs shifted to something about a baseball game. Lena sat in the plastic waiting chair. She had her phone out but was not using it. Nia appeared at 12:30 with a lunchbox and a clipboard. She sat at the folding table, opened the lunchbox, and extracted a sandwich with the precision of someone who had packed it herself and knew exactly what was in it. She ate 3 bites, then looked at Lena with the candid attention of children who have not yet learned to pretend they aren't looking. "Are you waiting for your car?" she asked. "It's not ready yet," Lena said. "The part is coming Thursday." Nia wrote something on her clipboard. Lena looked at the clipboard. Across the top, in careful letters, was written, "People I admire, school project." "Is that for school?" Lena asked. "Yes, I have to pick someone and write about them, but I'm still deciding." She looked at Lena with the flat-footed honesty of 9 years old. "What do you do?" Lena considered the question, not the answer. She knew the answer. She considered why the question from this child felt different than it did from anyone else. "I give money to people who need help starting things," she said. "Businesses, programs, schools." Nia chewed her sandwich. "Does it fix them?" In the garage bay, Marcus's wrench stopped moving. The question sat in the air between them, not hostile, not innocent either. 9-year-olds do not ask questions without reasons, they just don't always know what the reason is yet. Lena said, "Sometimes." Nia wrote something on the clipboard. "What does your dad do?" Lena asked, though she already knew. "He fixes things," Nia said. It was not a small answer. She said it the way a person states something that has been decided and does not require further discussion. Marcus started working again. Lena stayed until 2 o'clock. She did not have a reason that fit into a sentence. When she left, she drove the stuck-window Civic to a coffee shop she had never been to, sat at a corner table, and opened her laptop to the Hargrove Group's philanthropy portfolio. She looked at it for a long time, not readings, looking. The portfolio was large and clean and organized. It had done real good, she knew that, she believed it. Hospitals, scholarship funds, disaster relief. The numbers were right, the processes were right. But she sat there thinking about Nia's question. Does it fix them? She ordered another coffee. She stayed at the table until the shop got busy with the after-work crowd, and she no longer had an excuse to stay. On Wednesday, she went back to the garage for no reason again. This time she brought 2 coffees from the shop she had discovered, one for her, one for Marcus. She set his on the workbench without explanation. He looked at it, then at her, then said, "Thanks," and kept working. Gary noticed. Gary's eyebrows went up. Gary said nothing, which was unusual enough that the other 2 men looked at him to find out why he was quiet. Lena sat with her coffee. Nia was at the folding table again with her homework, and at some point, without any particular arrangement being made, Lena found herself looking at Nia's math worksheet and saying, "That one's wrong, try carrying the one." Nia erased it, tried it again, got it right, wrote the answer with slightly more force than necessary, the way children write when they've been corrected and want to make the correction permanent. At 4 o'clock, Marcus came to the waiting area doorway and leaned against the frame. "Thursday," he said, "by noon, I'll call you." She nodded, started gathering her things. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She looked up. "Why do you keep coming back?" It was not an accusation. It was not a flirtation. It was the question of a man who noticed things and saw no reason to pretend he hadn't. She thought about it, honestly. "I'm not entirely sure," she said. He nodded as though that was a reasonable and complete answer. Then he went back to work. She drove the Civic home in the late afternoon, the wind coming through the 4-inch gap in the passenger window, cold and specific against the side of her neck. Thursday morning, she was already dressed and moving before her phone rang. She answered before the second ring. "It's ready," Marcus said. She arrived at the garage at 9:15. She was early. She told herself it was because she had a board call at 11 and wanted to be sure there was time. This was true in the way that the most convenient truths are true, accurate, but not the whole thing. Marcus's garage looked the same as it always did, the hand-painted sign, the 2 open bays, Gary's car parked at its usual angle, meaning Gary and the others were already settled into their chairs with their coffee, prepared to supervise the morning without being asked to. She parked the Civic and walked in. Marcus was on the phone. She could hear his voice from the bay, low, steady, unhurried. She stopped just inside the doorway, meaning to wait without interrupting. She heard the word Thursday. She heard 48. She understood within a few seconds what she was hearing. He was talking to someone at Nia's school. The fall field trip had a fee, $48. He was asking whether they could work something out, whether there was a payment arrangement, whether Nia could pay in 2 parts. His voice did not change the way some people's voices change when they are embarrassed. It stayed the same, clear and direct, the same voice he used to tell her about camshaft sensors and timing chain tensioners, the same voice he used for everything, as if dignity was not something he adjusted according to who was listening. He turned and saw her. There was a half-second between when he saw her and when his expression settled. In that half-second, she saw something she recognized, not shame, not the performance of composure, but the very quiet adjustment a person makes when they realize they have been overhead in a private moment and have decided to simply continue being themselves. "Be right with you," he said, and turned back to finish the call. She walked to the waiting chairs. She sat down. She put her phone in her bag and left it there. The bill was ready on the counter. He brought it over without ceremony and set it in front of her. The number was the same number he had quoted her 6 days ago, not a penny more. Gary appeared in the bay doorway, coffee in hand, and took in the scene, the bill, Lena, Marcus standing with his hands in his pockets. "She paying with a card from her father's wallet," Gary said. It was the same mild, careless cruelty as always. Nothing in it was personal to Gary. It was the kind of thing that slips out of a man who has never had to think about what his words cost other people. Marcus looked at him. "Gary," he said. That was all he said, just the name. But something in it closed the door on the conversation completely, and Gary went back to his chair. Lena looked at the bill. She paid it. Full amount, no negotiation, nothing extra, because she was not a person who used money as a performance. She handed Marcus the card. He ran it, and he handed it back. "Your car handles well," he said. "I took it around the block after I finished. The sensor replacement smoothed out everything." "Thank you," she said. She stood. She picked up her bag. She should have left. She had a board call in 90 minutes and the drive was 20 minutes. She stood there anyway. "Your daughter," she said, "the field trip." He looked at her. "What school is she at?" He told her the name of the school, a public elementary school about 12 minutes from the garage. "I know the principal there," she said. It was true. The Hargrove Group had funded a reading program there 2 years ago. "I'll make a call." He was quiet for a moment, not the kind of quiet that is grateful and does not know how to say it, a different kind, measured. "I appreciate the thought," he said, "but I'd rather handle it myself." She looked at him. "It's $48. "I know what it is," he said, not hard, not cold, just a man who had his own way of doing things and the calm certainty to hold to it. She stood with that for a second, then she nodded, once, the way you nod when you understand something you did not fully expect to understand. She picked up her keys, her real keys, the SUV, not the Civic. At the door she stopped without turning around. "You're good at this," she said, "not just the cars." She left before he could respond. She sat in her car in the parking lot, not moving, engine off. The board call was in 88 minutes. She had 17 emails she hadn't answered. Her assistant had sent 3 reminder messages about a donor lunch on Friday that required her to be present and engaged and grateful in the particular way that large donors expected. She sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Then she called her assistant. "Push everything this afternoon," she said. Her assistant paused. "Everything. Everything." She ended the call. She sat there a little longer, watching a pigeon walk across the garage parking lot with enormous confidence. Then she drove away. She did not go home. She drove to the east side of Tulsa, a part of the city the Hargrove Group's portfolio touched in numbers and spreadsheets, but that she had not physically moved through in some time. She drove slowly, which was not her habit. She looked at the storefronts. The barber shop with the handwritten hours on the door, the laundromat with a sign offering change, the woman selling tamales from a folding table at the corner. She thought about the word fix. She thought about what Nia had asked her, with such plain and devastating simplicity, over a sandwich at a folding table in an oil-smelling garage. Does it fix them? She had said sometimes, and she had believed it. She still believed it. But she was sitting with a version of the question she had not considered before, not whether the money fixed the people who received it, but whether the way it was given had anything to do with the answer. Whether clean, organized, well-processed charity could do what a free jumpstart in a parking lot could do. Whether the form of a thing mattered as much as the fact of it. She pulled over. She opened a new document on her phone and typed for 9 minutes. Not an email, not a report, just thinking in words in the particular way she thought when something was still forming and she needed to see it outside her head. When she was done, she looked at what she had written. It was the beginning of something. She did not know yet what it would become, but she recognized the feeling. She had felt it twice before in her life, the sensation of an idea that arrives not as a finished thought but as a direction, a leaning, a pull towards something that is not yet a plan but already knows what it wants to be. She saved the document. She named it something simple. Then she put the car in drive and went back into the day, changed in some way that did not have a name yet but would. 6 weeks later, a letter arrived at Delacroix Auto. It was not an email. It was a physical letter in a white envelope printed on Hargrove Group letterhead, addressed to Marcus Delacroix by name. The envelope had been hand-delivered by a woman in a gray coat who arrived at 10 in the morning, set it on the counter without explanation, and left. Marcus wiped his hands and opened it. It was not an offer of money, it was not a check, it was an invitation. The Hargrove Group was launching a new program, small business grants for single-parent business owners in working-class zip codes across Tulsa. The first cohort was 12 people. The program would offer not just funding but mentorship, accounting support, and quarterly check-ins. It had been designed, the letter said, with input from community members and small business owners across the East Side. At the bottom of the letter, below the formal language and the program details, was a handwritten note, not on Hargrove letterhead, just Lena's handwriting in blue ink slightly slanted. I'm not offering you a grant. I'm asking if you'd be willing to meet with the 12 people who are receiving them, not as a beneficiary, as someone who knows something they need to know. Let me know if you're interested. Marcus read the letter twice. He folded it and put it in his shirt pocket. He went back to work. At lunch, Nia came in from school. She walked 3 blocks from the bus stop and sat at her folding table with her backpack and her lunch. She opened her lunchbox. Dad, she said, not looking up. Mrs. Farrell said my project won. He looked up from the engine he was sorting. First place, he asked. First place, she said it the way she said most good things, matter-of-factly, as if she had expected it, which she had. He smiled, the kind of smile that happens on a person's face before they can decide whether to show it. What did you write about? He asked. He knew she had been working on it. He knew it was about someone she admired. He had not asked who. He had figured she would tell him when she was ready. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the paper. It was 5 pages, handwritten with a drawing on the front, a woman at a table, a child across from her, a garage in the background. She handed it to him. He read it. The person Nia had chosen was not a teacher or a parent or a famous person from a textbook. She had written about the afternoon a woman came to the garage and sat at the folding table and helped her with a math problem she did not ask to be helped with. She had written about the way the woman listened when Nia asked questions, without making the questions feel small. She had written about what it felt like to talk to someone who was clearly very busy and very important, but who sat in the plastic chair as though she had nowhere else to be. She had written in her 9-year-old hand with one spelling error that had been circled and corrected. She came to our garage and I don't think she knew that she needed fixing too, but she came back 3 times, and the 3rd time she looked different, lighter, like when a car engine stops making that noise it was making and you know the problem got fixed. Marcus stood with the paper in his hands for a long moment. He folded it carefully. He handed it back to Nia. I'm proud of you, he said. She nodded as though this was already established. Then she took a bite of her sandwich. He went back to work, but his mind stayed with the paper, with the image of Nia watching Lena the way she watched engines, patiently, carefully, waiting to understand how something worked. He thought about the letter in his pocket. That afternoon, he called the number at the bottom of the Hargrove Group letterhead. The call went to an assistant who transferred him. Lena answered on the 2nd ring. I read your letter, he said. And he was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, thinking. The 12 people in your program, he said, have any of them had to borrow against their business to cover a personal shortfall and then spend 2 years recovering from it? She paused. I don't know, probably. Ask them, he said, before anything else, ask them that. Why? Because the way a person answers that question will tell you what kind of help they actually need, versus what kind of help looks good in a report. There was a silence on her end. Not the silence of someone offended, the silence of someone writing something down. Come to the first meeting, she said, Tuesday, 11 o'clock. I'll be there at 11, he said. I have a car in at 9, I should be done with by 10:30. She almost said something. He could hear it forming and then stopping. I'll see you Tuesday, she said. He ended the call. He stood in the garage in the late afternoon quiet, the light coming through the open bay doors at an angle that turned everything gold for about 20 minutes before it shifted. Nia was at her table. The radio was playing something slow and familiar. Gary came in from outside, coffee finished, heading to his car. He stopped at the bay door. Marcus, he said. Marcus looked up. Gary had something in his hands. He was turning it over, a folded piece of paper or maybe an envelope. He didn't hold it up. He just stood there for a moment with it. My son, he said, Derek, he's been trying to get his landscaping business off the ground. 3 years, can't get the bank to look at him. He stopped, turned the paper over again. Somebody told him about a grant program. Through the Hargrove Group, he qualified. He's in the first cohort. Marcus said nothing. Gary looked at the floor for a second, then at Marcus. His expression was not guilty, exactly. It was the expression of a man who has been carrying something and has decided finally to set it down. I didn't know it was connected, Gary said, to the woman, to you. Marcus looked at him. I know, Marcus said. Gary nodded slowly. There was something in the nod, not an apology, not quite, but the shape of one, the outline of it. Derek's a good worker, Gary said. I know he is, Marcus said. I've seen him. He did the lot behind the bakery on 5th. Gary looked up. You know his work. I recommended the bakery to him 2 summers ago, Marcus said. They were looking for someone. I gave them his number. Gary stood with that for a moment, the full weight of it. The fact that the man he had casually mocked and needled and treated as the subject of jokes for 2 years had, without saying anything to anyone, done something concrete and good for his son. He opened his mouth. Marcus went back to the engine. Lock the side door when you leave, Gary, he said. The latch sticks. Gary closed his mouth. He walked to the side door. He locked it on his way out, carefully making sure the latch caught. The garage was quiet. Nia looked up from her homework. She looked at the bay where her father was working. She looked at the side door Gary had just gone through. She picked up her pencil. She wrote something at the bottom of her homework page, then looked at it, then erased it, then wrote it again. Marcus worked until 7. He always worked until 7. Then he shut off the lights in the bay, washed his hands at the deep sink, and collected Nia and her backpack and her lunchbox and the notebook that lived permanently under her arm. They walked out together into the October evening, the air cool and smelling of coming rain. Nia slid her hand into his. Dad, she said. Yeah. When I grow up, she said, I want to fix things like you. He looked down at her, the uneven pigtails, the one sock pulled up higher, the pencil she still had behind her ear. You already do, he said. They walked to the truck. He unlocked her side first, the way he always did, then walked around to his. 2 days later, Nia's field trip fee arrived at the school, paid in full, anonymously, through the Hargrove Group's community fund. A fund so quiet and so broad that no single payment in it could be traced to any individual decision. Marcus never mentioned it. If he knew, he gave no sign, and maybe he didn't know. Maybe it was exactly what it appeared to be, a fund doing what it was designed to do, finding the places where $48 made the difference between a child going on a trip with her class and sitting in an empty school building wondering why. Or maybe it was a woman who had learned something about how to give without making the giving the point. Either way, Nia went on the trip. She stood at the edge of the nature reserve and looked at the creek and the trees and the mud and the birds with the same focused attention she gave everything, the attention of a person who believed the world was full of things worth understanding. She wrote about it in her notebook, 3 pages with drawings. She showed them to her father that night. He read every word. 6 months later, at a Hargrove Group board meeting in a building with floor-to-ceiling windows and water served in glasses that were probably unnecessary, Lena stood at the end of a long table and delivered the results of the first grant cohort. 11 of 12 businesses had grown revenue in the first quarter. Derek, Gary's son, had taken on 2 employees and had 3 new contracts. A woman named Patricia had expanded her bookkeeping service into a second location. A man named Owen had bought a second food truck. A board member asked what had driven the design of the program, what had made this cohort different from previous grant programs, what specific innovation in structure or selection had produced results this strong. Lena thought about a plastic chair, a child's drawing taped to a wall, a man who did not change his voice when he thought someone might be listening to something private. We asked better questions before we gave any money, she said, and we found someone who understood what the people in this program actually needed, not what looked like a solution, what actually was one. The board member nodded and wrote something down. He was satisfied with this. It was a good answer, logical, strategic. He asked who the advisor had been. She said it was a mechanic on the east side, and the board laughed warmly, assuming the lightness of the answer was the point. She let them. She did not explain that she meant it completely. That the man who had fixed her car had, in 6 weeks of small and unhurried moments, reoriented something in her that 12 years of education and 2 degrees, and a portfolio of very correct philanthropic decisions had not touched. She did not explain any of that. She just picked up the next slide and moved on. On the east side, in a 2-bay garage with a hand-painted sign, Marcus Delacroix was under a car. The radio was playing. The coffee on the burner had been there too long. Nia was at the folding table with her notebook. The morning was ordinary. That was the whole point.